Hello and welcome to the Promethean Secular Uprising. I'm your host, Joshua Void, and tonight we're going to jump into something fantastic. Again, I want to apologize for the hiatus, I really do, but tonight's conversation is going to be fantastic. But before we go into that, I really do want to thank my Patreon supporters, Linear, Dion LaShay, and oh my sweet mother of Lord, hold on. And I put the right up here, Linear, Dion LaShay, and Calasia. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. And it really does mean a lot to me. So thank you. Again, for everybody who's watching the show for the first time or just watching into the show, thank you very much for coming in and being part of this conversation. So thank you very much. So without any further ado, let us jump right into the conversation at hand. So the case against miracles. What is a miracle? So a lot of individuals would like to claim. So what is a miracle? So there are certain people who claim that miracles are something that violates nature in and of itself, right? So an outside body affecting the world and the universe in a particular way that violates the laws of nature in a particular way, right? However, I think that there is a different meaning for nature that a lot of people like to for miracles, my apologies, that people like to delve into nowadays, and that is the sense of awe, to be awe-inspired of something. So towards a certain extent, a lot of people would say, like, wow, existence is a miracle, or that sunset over there is a miracle in and of itself, right? So a lot of times people would like to equate miracles as something that has some sort of awe-inspiring condition to it, right? Awe-inspiring feeling that they get. However, I think that what we're really delving into, because all that has to do with the natural world and the natural processes of things. So if that is the case, then we can literally just break it down. At least when we're talking about something that is awe-inspiring, we could say that that is based on the natural world. We do not need to equate that into the actual miracles that classical theists like to bring up. So we can put that one aside, the asideness of, let's just say, the awe of a particular thing. So towards a certain extent, we can put that in everything that has the awe aside and say that is natural in and of itself. However, and thank you, Linear, very much. I'm happy to be back, and I'm glad that I sound good also. So thank you. Because a lot of times the audio issues are kind of a problem on this, but we're good. So now, when we're talking about miracles, we're talking about, in general, something that is, quote unquote, an outside force influencing the world in a particular way. Now, what way are we looking at this violation of nature per se? Well, we can kind of state that the violation of nature in and of itself is, let's just say, a person gets into a car crash, right? But somehow by the luck or by a miracle, he or she was able to survive that car crash nearly unscathed, while everybody around her had horrendous consequences, some fatal, some less fatal. However, what we would like to look at is that person would say, well, wow, I have some sort of guardian angel, or there was a miracle. Like I faced a miracle at that time because I didn't have that serious injuries coming from that car crash, right? So that's more what we're trying to focus on. And let alone, we're also going to focus on biblical miracles in and of themselves. So let's just say the river, the Nile River, literally becoming filled with blood and stinking of sewage and everything like that, which was within the Old Testament. where God was showing his strength to the Egyptians at that particular time. Obviously, it didn't necessarily work because the Egyptians still held his people for quite some time. But nonetheless, we had that miracle, right? We also have the walking on water miracle that Jesus was told, or not Jesus was told, but we were told that Jesus had done. We were told, obviously, of the miracle of Jesus ascending into the heavens in and of itself and becoming or sitting on the side of God in and of himself and interacting with, let's just say, Saul and Paul, or Saul, who became Paul. Right. That's the way how it works. And let alone, we're talking also about the loaves of fish and so on and so forth that Jesus did. So these are miracles that we're talking about in today's day. And let alone, we're going to delve into miracles that happen or that supposedly happen even to this day. Let's just say at like Lourdes, for instance, where the people believe that they are being cured from their ailments and everything, and because from literally dunking themselves into a pool or into this fountain pool that is there, it's supposed to heal the sick and heal the wounded and the lame and the people who might even have physical disabilities in and of themselves, like blindness and so on and so forth. So we're going to delve into that too today. So it's going to be a fantastic day. So let's get into it. Is a miracle a violation of nature? I would claim that yes, a miracle is a violation of nature and the natural causes of which we observe and we see. However, can we also state that can a miracle in and of itself, just like how we discussed in the beginning of the show, can a miracle be something that can be a person can feel a sense of awe towards? And just like how I stated, yes, nowadays a miracle has transformed through our way of speaking, in a sense, to mean things that can also be natural as well. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a violation of nature. It can also be the following of nature in and of itself, and how that very effect has on us personally. When we see that, like as I stated, I was going to say a sunshine, let's just say a sunset or whatever, or the sun rising right within the horizon, and we feel this sense of awe when we look at that. And also being a part of nature as well, a lot of people feel a sense of awe when they're walking in a forest and they're kind of like engaging with nature in and of itself. They feel appreciative of the life that they have and appreciative of the experience that they're experiencing at that point in time. So what we can say is that through proper parlance, towards a certain extent, that yes, a miracle has evolved in order to also equate the awe-inspiredness that individuals get when they're experiencing the natural world. But as I stated, that is nature. That is part of nature. That is not a violation of nature. And henceforth, we can get rid of that miracle, or we can get rid of that kind of conversation about miracles. We can get into it later on, obviously, and we can kind of show that, well, okay, well, this is just showing the natural world. And obviously, well, when we're in the natural world, we have a sense of awe-inspiredness to it, right? And henceforth, we are wowed by the experiences of which we are experiencing. But that is going to be later on tonight. We're getting into the good stuff right now. So now we're going to also discuss a particular thing. What is nature B and nature N? Now, a lot of individuals don't necessarily understand this particular statement. What is nature B? What is nature N? It's very difficult to really understand and comprehend. But nature B is what observational or what science has observed right now. And later on, we'll continue to observe. There will be more open to us as science starts to progress the way that it's going, and if it's able to progress the way that it's going. 1 second. Thank you. Yes, I came back with one hail of a vengeance. So, one second. So, nature B is something that observational science or science has observed thus far. And later on, will continue to observe and grow from that. Now, nature N is something particular that is the part or I don't want to say the fringe because fringe has a negative connotation to it, but it's kind of like on the border of what science knows and doesn't know, and then extends from that point into the unknown. That science, where a lot of people state that science and even philosophy and so on and so forth will not be able to comprehend, know, and we might never know. But the question is that even though that might be the case, either through, let's just say, uh, the extinction of the human race or some sort of extinctionary event in and of itself, right? Which might even send us back. Where for me, when I say send back, it means that all the progress that we have made, or quote unquote progress that we have made as of now, gets turned back because of the environment or the drastic change of the environment of which we now or which we then live in compared to now. And I'll delve into that later on as well in a different conversation. So nature B in and of itself is based on what science has already is already figuring out or on the verge of figuring out or really uh um and has already observed. Sorry about that. And nature N is the thing that is right on the cusp of what science is trying to figure out and beyond that. Kind of like dark matter, dark energy, even quantum mechanics. All the rest of that is kind of within that gray area about what science is trying to know, or what scientists like quantum physicists, pure mathematicians, and so on and so forth are trying to understand, and even beyond that, where the things that we don't even know as of yet is all part of nature N. So I just wanted to put a distinction on that so when I'm speaking, everybody can understand the realm of which I am speaking in, right? So if something is unknown to us in nature B, does that mean it's a miracle, or is it something we might be able to answer when we have knowledge of nature N? Now, that bottom statement I will put more emphasis on, but at the top, I'm going to focus on the top statement right now. So, if something is unknown in nature B, does that mean it's a miracle? I think already it's a kind of indication that no, like if something is unknown to us right now, that does not mean it cannot be known in the future, right? So, and just like with all things with science, which I'm going to delve into, and even towards the extent of Lourdes, for instance, in France, where people are delving into the waters and feeling themselves being better or being cured, let's just say miraculously, there is an issue with that because beforehand, and I'll bring it up right now, in Lourdes, for instance, before that, there was 2,000, no, more than that. I think it was 10,000 from 1881 to 1947. There was 10,000 cured cases of individuals who had supposedly been cured by the water in and of itself, right? But from 1947 until 1992, that had drastically dropped to 62 cure cases. Now, that is miraculous in its own self, no pun intended. But the question in and of itself is why and how did that number from 10,000 drop to literally 200 and is continuously dropping today? Because we're understanding more of nature N, right? Our observation within science and philosophy is drastically expanding to such an extent that things that were miraculous to us at that point are no longer miraculous because there is a reason, there's a natural explanation to that event. that it happened. Only explanation. That is right. I think God hates them now. That's the only explanation. I completely agree. But when we're literally looking at this case, and this is a case for all types of miracles, cure miracles, miraculous, let's just say, even towards the extent of car crashes and everything like that. There are certain times when there's a sense of, I don't want to say, because coincidence is not the right word, but it's either our ignorance towards a particular subject or our tendency to lean towards the marvelous and the unknown. Like, for instance, another example that I can give, and I think it's Neil deGrasse Tyson who gives this example. He stated that one day there was a call from a police officer driving down a road who believed he was experiencing a UFO in front of him, right? And he was driving and swerving down the highway, not highway, but swerving down this mountain pass, stating, and I think a lot of people might have heard this, one before. So if you have, please forgive me for retelling the story. But he's swerving down the road, seeing the UFO zigzagging in the sky and everything like that. And he was relaying this to his back at police headquarters. What it ended up being was Venus, because on that particular day, and I forget the particular day, Venus is especially bright at that time during that season and stuff like that. It becomes extremely bright. So what the police officer was seeing was Venus, and the reason why he was seeing it moving back and forth was because he was so focused on Venus that he wasn't realizing that his zigzagging through the mountain pass was making it seem like Venus, or that the UFO was moving back and forth, when in reality it was him moving through the pass, observing the object and being confused based on this particular, what I would say, illusion that the object was moving by itself, when it was actually him moving that said object through his zigzagging. So again, the unknown nature of hold on, let me reformulate what I'm trying to say. Nature B, things that might be unknown, can definitely be known with the more knowledge you have in a particular subject matter. That's why even Neil deGrasse Tyson says, when you see amateur astronomers looking up at the sky, you literally start seeing the amount of UFO sightings drop drastically compared to from the general public, because the general public doesn't necessarily understand the case of UFO sightings. And I'm tying all this together to miracles, because I'm trying to show that through the sense of not knowing, even the nature B in and of itself, with certain individuals. So, and that's where I would even state that nature N is different for each and every person, right? Because the more that you don't know, the more nature N is to you. So even though that observational science already knows this particular thing, because you yourself does not know that's what science knows, obviously, then that means nature N has a greater expanse within your knowledge than it does within a person who is either delving into sciences or trying to keep up with the sciences in and of itself. So miraculous things have more of a tendency to be brought up from people who don't necessarily even know nature B in and of itself. So that's the whole entire point that I'm trying to bring up, like UFOs and all this stuff, because those things are part of the miraculous. Those things are part of things that are marvelous to us. So that's why I'm bringing that up. Hold on. I forgot that the thing was it. So if a miracle is is a strong case for supernaturalism doesn't mean that it's a validation of God's existence. So, what we're talking about is an omnipotent being, right? We're talking about the omni God. We're not just talking about any other type of God that might have omnipotence but doesn't have omnibenevolence, or that has omnipotence and omnibenevolence but doesn't have omnipresence, right? We're talking about the full rounded cake of God himself that we're delving into. Or could it validate, like if we are stating that miracles are from the supernatural? So we're going along with the theists right now. We're saying that we believe in miracles and that miracles are on an extent what we are observing is something supernatural, something that is violating the laws of nature and creating a circumstance and a happenstance that is completely different compared to just letting nature be and letting nature run its course, right? So, or could it validate the existence of other gods or a plurality of gods, right? Now, that in and of itself is a very interesting question because when we're delving into miracles in and of themselves, we must literally look at miracles, if we believe in miracles, that where are we getting our validation that a miracle has to be a validation of just the Judeo-Christian or the Abrahamic God's existence, right? Because if you were going to go and speak to, let's just say, a Hindu or something along those lines, he may say that all books, all spiritual books have some sort of connectivity to them, right? And even a Buddhist might say that, and even people who are spiritual might say that. But when you really look at the literature in and of themselves amongst all these religious and holy books, you see that there's one thing that is of, how could I say it, that is of difference. And that is the way of how their gods kind of interact with human beings and with themselves and with angels and so on and so forth. And they're actually completely different, right? Including, let's just say, even the Abrahamic gods, when we look at individuals who are, let's just say, Jewish in general, they do not believe they do not believe that Jesus was God, or they don't believe that Jesus was even the Messiah. We're not even going to the far extent of being God. Dude, they're even stating that they don't even believe that he is the Messiah or the coming of the Messiah. Now, that is something that is interesting to me because even though there are some philosophers that say, well, no, their miracles aren't a good validation of God's existence, I argue that if there is such thing as a miracle, it doesn't necessarily validate God's existence, but it does validate the existence of a particular thing, right? That is strong enough to violate the laws of nature itself, right? Now, whatever that thing is, we don't know. But that thing is able to violate the laws of nature, and henceforth we can kind of call that thing a god. It doesn't need to be a god with a big G or a little g. To me, I find that it doesn't make any difference. We're still talking about the thing that is supernatural. However, if we did believe in the supernatural, now we run into a problem, right? Because then after it's like, well, what God is the correct God? Is it a plethora of gods that are making things work? And some of them are in conflict with each other and wanting humanity to go in different ways, right? And believe in different things or believe in only themselves and not their other partners that are also up in the heavens, air quotations. What ends up happening here is very interesting because now, even if you do say that the supernatural does exist, now we have more questions. What kind of deity are we talking about? Does the deity need to be omnipotent, or does it just need to have enough strength in order to break the laws of nature in and of itself? And some people would even say, heretically so, to the religious individuals, but humans were able to do this, to literally bend the laws of nature towards a certain extent to our whim, to benefit us. So, and I'm pretty sure that the theists wouldn't sit down and say, well, of course, human beings are gods. Absolutely not. And we wouldn't even be named even God with a small g, or even a plethora of gods in and of themselves. We wouldn't even be, we are mortal beings, and we are able to influence nature in particular ways that is for our benefit. So, what is, because if we're going to say that a deity violates the laws of nature, we got to go deeper into the fundamentals of what we're talking about when we talk about the laws of nature. Because if we're just talking about influencing waterways, influencing, just like within the Bible itself, and even within the Quran itself as well, where Muhammad rode on a winged horse up into the heavens in and of itself. And when you really start looking at that, you can slowly start to see that these things aren't as miraculous. Or if we're talking about a God that is absolute, you would question, is this really something that an absolute all-powerful God would do? Give some prophet a horse to ride up to the heavens in, or to split the moon in half, but somehow we have no validation of this said happenstance, like it says that the Muslims also believe in as well. This doesn't make any sense. So when we are looking and we're trying to validate our positions within understanding a miracle, we have to literally push the laws of nature towards this extent of literally breaking not just, as I stated, waterways or moving mountains or whatever to say, or splitting objects or anything like that, but it would have to be towards such an extent that the fundamental laws of nature, literally that gravity, that the very quantum mechanics that make everything work the way that they do, is disrupted. But obviously, the thing is that when we really understand and delve into miracles, and definitely biblical miracles, Quranic miracles, Judaic miracles in and of themselves, and let alone all the other miracles of every other religion which is out there, we slowly start to see that because they didn't believe in atoms, because they didn't believe in, well, and obviously we didn't have information on quantum mechanics at that time, a lot of things have to do with the physicality of things. So the splitting of the Red Sea, the cutting of the moon in half, the turning the water of the Nile River into blood and literally smelling of sewage so that the Egyptians weren't able to drink from it and everything like that. So we claim that these are breaking the laws of nature, and we can kind of see that, okay, well, this is breaking the laws of nature, let's just say for nature B. But could there be an happenstance for nature N that these things over a certain duration of time, who knows how long it might take, that naturally that certain things can happen in that way? Maybe sulfur was able to bleed into the Nile River, and from there literally transform the water into this clayish redness, just like how we see within not South Africa, but within the African province of the Congo, I believe, where there is literally a body of water which is full of sulfuric acid and everything, or full of sulfur, that it has literally transformed the water a reddish color, and that also has such a potent smell to it that it had wiped out a village of literally 2,000 people. That is something, and a lot of people would claim that this would be God's wrath on these particular villagers if you didn't know what happened. But we figured out what happened. There was a quote unquote landslide. I shouldn't say quote unquote, but a landslide which happened, which disrupted the earth, which was underneath the water, and there was a sulfuric buildup underneath that earth. And when the landslide happened and pushed on that, it actually burst up where the sulfuric acid or sulfuric water, or not water, but so the sulfur was able to get into the water stream of this lake and transform the lake into such a reddish color. And as I stated, completely wiped out the entire village and all its animals and everything that was within its parameter and everything. So, just with that being stated, maybe that could have, yeah, but its interaction with water can sometimes transform it to be this reddish type of color. And let alone it can really, it does have such a horrendous smell to it. And it, not even just smell, it can literally, as I stated, sadly for this population of people, wipe out an entire village in a day or less. So it's just crazy. It's just crazy to really delve into things that even we don't even know, and only kind of like scientists that know about what these type of reactions within water, and let alone geology and geologists and everything like that, can really start to understand these type of questions and everything. So that's why but anyways, back to the question of the supernatural, we need to we can literally say that the thing that is supernatural in and of itself could be stronger than a human, let's just say, and maybe have, and well, even when we say stronger than a human, what are we even talking about? Right? Because when you're bending the laws of nature in and of itself, it's not necessarily having strength, it's literally changing the composition of what nature is, which is not a tendency, in my opinion at least, a tendency of strength whatsoever. Before I go continue, I do want to give anybody time to ask any questions or anything like that. So please, if you have any questions, please ask. And also, if you do like the show, please smack him, hit that like button and subscribe button. It really does help us. Thank you very much. Can you remind us what nature B and nature N are? Perfect. So nature B is what science can observe. And I'm talking about even the fringes of science where we're answering kind of questions about, or trying to answer the questions such as what is quantum mechanics in and of itself, and how does it actually work, and how does it, can it come together with relativity, with Einstein's theory of relativity, or is it just too incompatible, or an emergent, right, process that then separated and has no necessary, not necessary, but doesn't have that connection anymore from what it emerged from. So it's very interesting. So nature N and nature B is the observational sciences and what science can observe, and let alone what we can think even philosophically. I would even add that into nature B as well. And nature N can only be brought about underneath how nature B can influence, not influence, but know of nature N, right? So nature N is the things that we don't know. So it's on the fringe of what we're trying to know to everything that we don't know. And nature B is everything that we do know to the fringe of everything that we're trying to know. So I hope that is that helps a bit. And if it doesn't, I'll try to be more succinct in my explanation. And if anybody else has a question, please ask your question, because I really do want to engage. But if anything, if you just want me to continue on, I can do that as well. So yes, back to boom. 1 second. So yes, and let alone there's also something else. Maybe there is a God, but the God is malevolent, right? And what has more of a tendency with the world that we live in, let's just say, and it makes a little more sense, is that what if this malevolent God creates miracles, these small little miracles that happen in order to build up people's hopes, in order to crush the hopes of these particular individuals, or maybe even to crush the hopes of other individuals who are observing the well-being of this particular person who had this miracle happen to them, right? Because a miracle doesn't necessarily mean that the thing is omnibenevolent. A miracle could just be that the thing is malevolent, and so malevolent that it allows there to be miracles in order to build up the hope of the people that are underneath its influence and underneath its power, in order to cut down the people more, right? So that's another aspect where people think, and let alone, I would even state that the devil himself, that Satan himself, also does quote unquote miracles. Because if we're stating that a miracle is just a violation of nature in and of itself, then we can even state that demons, angels, uh, Satan himself can do miracles as well, right? So that in and of itself really brings out the questioning about what are we talking about when we really mean miracles, and are miracles only miracles when they're for good? Because I would ask the question, would we say not that the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah to be a miracle, a violation of nature, and let alone because these people were sinning against God and in wanting to violate the angels in and of themselves that God has um, sent down to Sodom and Gomorrah? Wouldn't we say that the destruction of these two cities are be a miracle? Or does a miracle only have to be good? The goodness of God working in miraculous ways in order to help people, right? And that's where I find that miracles are so difficult to really pinpoint and really try to validate. Because if you're just saying that it's just the violation of nature, then there are so many things that can, even ghosts can fit inside that very thing. So it's just like, where are we going with this? Are we literally going to be talking about all these different ideas about what a miracle is? Or is a miracle, are we going to try to bring a distinction to it that it has to be a good thing, like a good event or a good happenstance that happens to a particular individual when there's chaos happening all around? But even then, right, there's many gods and even angels themselves that have done miracles as well. So what is the difference between a miracle of an angel and a miracle of God? Or if we're just talking about the violation of nature, what's the difference between God's miracles and the miracles of Satan, or the miracles of, the ghosts, or so on and so forth, right? So and let alone other gods in and of themselves. So it's very interesting to delve down in here. And if there are any Christians or even just deists that come in and get to this part of the conversation, please let me know in the description below on what you believe what miracles are. Is it only based on God's goodness, or is it just a violation of the laws of nature? All right. So now, what is Hume's argumentation on miracles? So now, because Hume was a philosopher back in the 17th century who was a skeptic. He was a very skeptical philosopher. And he was, I think, the first one to really tackle the problem of miracles, or at least utilize the argumentation on miracles in a particular way of viewing them in skepticism and everything. And how should we take miracles when we're delving into it, when when our loved ones, or let alone when people come to us and no, listen, God did, or not God, but Jesus did rise from the dead and everything. How are we supposed to really look at these type of miracles in the first place? And how are we supposed to question these miracles in the first place? And why should we be skeptical in these miracles in the first place? So I really give a lot of these the example of a case against miracles. I give Hume a very big mantle of that in the beginning for this type of discussion to begin with, because he really sat down and planned and thought and really worked hard at what were miracles and how do they come about and how could we verify if they do happen and stuff like that. So some of Hume's argumentation is this. So first, Hume says there's no real attested miracles. So what he's stating here is that when people are coming to you, how do you know that they're not trying to deceive you? That's the first question. How do you know that they're not trying to deceive you and state that, oh, there's a miracle and you need to believe this because if you don't, you know, either you're going to go to hell or you're going to do something bad is going to happen to you. But if you do believe this, then there's salvation for you and so on and so forth. And I'm going to delve into that later on into this conversation. But I truly do believe that everything that we look at when it comes to God and everything like that is based on miracles. And I don't understand why individuals and even philosophers state that miracles don't hold that much validation anymore for the, let's just say, the philosophical discussion on God, for instance. And I find that more philosophers, and even towards the extent more theists, are trying to push away miracles now. But I find that is very odd because all belief systems originate from their miraculous happenings. So why are you pushing away from the very thing that has brought forward your said belief system in the first place? Very odd to me, very odd. But we'll continue with that later. So another thing that he states is, how do you know that person wasn't deceived by their own mind? How do you know that what they saw was truly something miraculous? Because remember, now you're not really seeing with your own eyes what this individual saw. Now you're predominantly just hearing it from them stating, this is what happened. Trust me, this is what happened. But how and why should I trust you? When we talk about miracles, which in and of itself are miraculous happenings, meaning that there needs to be such substantial evidence to come to a proper conclusion that a miracle happens, then why should I just say from this particular individual that yes, miracles exist, I'm in full agreement and everything like that? I need to look critically at what the person is saying and literally ask these type of questions. First off, how do I know that this person does not have malicious intent? Secondly, how do I know if this person just didn't understand the circumstances or the event that happened to them? And for them, because they didn't necessarily know what was happening, like for instance, I'll give an example. Ball lightning, for instance, is something that happens underneath certain weather conditions, right? And when they occur, they move extremely slow and they kind of just look like a ball, like an orb of just pulsating light in and of itself. Now, to a person that doesn't necessarily understand what the heck ball lightning is, I can definitely understand people looking and saying that that could possibly be a soul, or maybe that could possibly be, I don't know, some sort of entity in and of itself, or maybe a god somewhere traveling and observing what its boundaries are. Just like if we look at paganism, for instance, there was a god of everything. There was a god of literally rivers, ocean, of wheat and so on and so forth. So this particular thing could have been an entity or a god observing its realm in and of itself, oddly enough, and just seeing what needs fixing or something along those lines, right? But at the same time, when we look at it naturally, it kind of under you there's less questions to ask when you look at it naturally. That okay, it's a weather pattern that is able to create this said event to happen. And if that is the case, then we can say that ball lightning has a naturalistic explanation that doesn't have a lot of things to do with question begging when you're stating, no, ball lightning is an entity, a ghost, or something like that. Because then there's a plethora of other questions that build from there. And a lot of people who just can't answer those questions run into major problems and everything like that. And secondly, and thirdly, the other question that needs to be asked is how do you not know, or how would you know if the person in and of themselves are sane, right? Because if the person is off the rocker, let's just say, the question then lies is that are you going to just blindly believe what other individuals say, or are you going to literally, you know, think about what is being stated and see, well, okay, has this person, even though it's difficult to state, but has this person ever lied before? Has this person ever, are they a good person? Are they, whatever the justification of a good person is? And people's justifications are all over the place for what a good person could be, what they must be, how they should act, so on and so forth. Are they a person and I know, don't get me wrong, I know piety isn't necessarily mean a good thing, but are they somebody who truly believes that doing the wrong thing is a bad thing to do, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. So when you're asking yourself these type of questions, or when you're hearing that something miraculous happened to somebody, first off, question, just like how Hume stated, question yourself, do they know all things of nature? And the question is, if science don't know, and let alone philosophers don't know all things of nature, then definitely this individual does not know all things of nature. And if that is the case, then we have a reason to be skeptical over this supposed miracle, because, again, even though it may take a long duration of time for this event to happen, these kind of events might be able to happen underneath certain happenstances, or certain, let's just say, combinations of things occurring at the same time. And henceforth to us, which may seem like a miracle because, my God, this is the first time we're seeing this, to nature itself is just something that's natural, that occurs underneath certain happenstances. And another thing that we must look at is, what is the person's justification for stating these type of things in the first place, right? So that's the first thing that Hume hits on. So the second thing that Hume hits on is that the human mind has a positive tendency for the strange and marvelous in an extreme degree. So now there's a beautiful thing that Mills wrote about. Predominantly, it was based on Plato, and let alone the Socratic method. What he stated was the mind on its own, right? Now, there's a Latin name for it. I forget the Latin name for it, and I apologize for that. But what the Latin name breaks down to, is the mind on its own. So what Mills argued, and what even Socrates argued, or what Plato stated Socrates argued, was that the human mind has a tendency to go rogue with certain things and with certain happenings. So what happens when the human mind in and of itself is encountering something that it doesn't understand or doesn't comprehend, it jumps to conclusions. And a lot of times it jumps to the miraculous conclusions. I don't understand what this is. This means dang, right? Like, for instance, another thing, UFO, right? What does UFO stand for? Unidentified flying object. That's all the tendency that UFO stands for. But what do we do when we think of UFO? Well, now a UFO is flying object that has an alien within it that is coming from another planet to whatever, to observe us for scientific reasons, or to help us get to a higher extent of being in order to enter the galactic community, and all the rest of these other things that people like to construe within their minds. But the reality of what a UFO is an unidentified flying object. And you, by giving it a definition, have now broken something that is unidentified, and you have now identified it. It doesn't make any sense. Now, likewise, for the miraculous happenings of something, you are taking something that you do not know, and already you are turning it into something that now you do know. Oh my God, it's God that has given me this miracle. Or, oh my God, God has helped me through this. Or if you were back in ancient times, by the gods. Like, we went through this huge storm, but by the gods and by Poseidon, we had him on our side and we conquered the waves, or whatever the circumstance may be, right? So we have a tendency to jump to conclusions when we have no idea what that event was in the first place. And henceforth, just like how Hume stated, we need to be skeptical, because a lot of times our brains always loves to jump to conclusions. And through jumping to conclusions without having the evidence to prove that something literally happened to you in a way that was bestowed upon by God, by the gods, by spirits, by whatever, gives us an indication, at least as skeptics, to be skeptical over your claim. So that's another thing. Thirdly, reports of miracles are reported by people who might be ignorant by the happenstance, or might not have that much knowledge of the workings of nature be. So what Hume was stating at this moment is that he is looking at society and civilizations and how they themselves interact with the miraculous. 1 second. So when we delve into the third argumentation that Hume makes, which is predominantly people don't understand nature B, let alone they're trying to jump to conclusions to nature N, but they don't even understand certain aspects of nature B in and of itself. So how could you even claim, right, that a happenstance happened to you that was breaking the laws of nature if you don't know A, nature B, and B, you don't, and mostly nobody else knows, including scientists in and of themselves, even though that they're prodding in, they're tickling the universe in and of itself, so to say, through pure mathematics and quantum mechanics, and let alone even just astrophysics, and also through philosophy as well. What we end up seeing, right, is that if they themselves don't know nature N, and they have more of a knowledge of what nature B is compared to your normal ordinary person, then your normal ordinary person doesn't even know the very nature of nature B itself, which is what science can observe. And if they don't know even that, then how could you jump to nature N and say there is something that is violating the laws of nature when normal people don't even know what is the violation of nature be in and of itself, observe what science can observe. And yet you're stating that you understand nature N as well? No. So again, just like how Hume stated, be very skeptical when you think that individuals, when people claim that there is a miracle that has occurred, because a lot of times that might not be the case. The person just might be ignorant, and there's a high possibility that the person is ignorant based on the event which has happened to them. And if that is the case, and just like how I explained beforehand, just like when you look at people with UFO sightings, what is the case? There's more UFO sightings by people who don't know astronomy than there are the people who are amateur astronomers, or even astronomers in and of themselves. And the higher you go up the food chain of knowledge, the more UFO sightings start to dwindle to such an extent that they become almost nigh impossible. Nigh impossible. Oh, and I said almost, not fully impossible. But so that's the case. When we really break it down, and we do that with miracles too, when you slowly start looking at what is possible within at least nature B, you slowly but surely start to see that, and just like with Lourdes, in the town of Lourdes in France, what is the case? Remember, from 1881 all the way to 1947, there were literally 10,000 cures that happened to people that delved into this water that was coming from a fountain and stuff like that. 10,000 cures. And by 1947 to 1992, 200 cures. So now, when we're really delving into it, there seems to be a very large consistency with the more knowledge people have, the less things are miraculous, and the less miraculous things happen. And with that being stated, again, just like how Hume stated with his third response, a lot of people, when they're looking at the miraculous, what do? Their very first thing to jump to is to conclusions. They don't have the answers, but they sure as hell love to come up with some conclusions to the answers which they don't have, or to the questions that they don't have. So that's the other thing that Hume stated. Fourthly, different religions are in conflict. Their claims, therefore, undermine and destroy one another. Now, this one, even philosophers and certain people like to argue, because they think that, well, no, that is not the case, right? Because if we truly delve into, let's just say, the miraculous claims of Christianity and Islam or whatever, because skepticism is starting to grow, and because the atheist and agnostic community are growing, theists feel that banding together is best. So as of these days, theists, when they're in a room with other theists, right? When it comes to being in a room also with atheists or agnostics, they have a tendency to band together and say, well, the miracles that happen in this said religion, let's just say in Islam, validate all other theistic belief systems, or at least the Abrahamic belief systems, and everything like that. And maybe you may have the Hindu state that, well, all your belief or all your miracles also validate my miracles as well, because our God is the same or whatever. But the reality of the situation is when we slowly start delving, and when those atheists and agnostics leave the room, now all of a sudden those said miracles that were once banning those groups together are now the thing that then divides those said groups. Well, Jesus didn't rise from the dead as a Muslim state. He literally survived and everything like that. There was another person who was crucified. And it wasn't Jesus. Jesus is a prophet, but he's not a Messiah and he's not a God. And he did not rise to heaven. So right there, one miraculous circumstance within Christianity is completely and absolutely undermined by the Muslim belief system. And let alone, even if you look at Judaism, for instance, it's the same viewpoint when it comes to Islam and let alone to Christianity. They do not see the Prophet Muhammad being a prophet, and they do not see Jesus as being the Messiah, and henceforth, or even the Son of God. So all of these type of things, and let alone they don't believe that he rose up to the heavens either. And henceforth, what is that? That is Christianity being undermined by Judaism and everything like that. And let alone the Christians look at the people who believe in Judaism as those who believe in the Old Testament, which has now been changed to the New Testament and everything like that. So the Old Testament is now done, and a New Testament has been created from the death of Christ. So that kind of at the same time undermines certain aspects of Judaism and certain miracles of Judaism, or the miracles that are underneath the Judaistic belief system. So again, we run into a dividing factor, and a huge dividing factor when it comes to the miraculous believings in the theistic worldview or the Abrahamic worldview. And let alone, don't get me started on other religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on and so forth, that have their own miraculous stories and everything, and how those undermine the very instances of Christianity and Islam, and how Islam and Christianity look on those other religions and those other miracles as being done by demons and being done not by God, but by Satan or demons in and of themselves. Again, undermining the miracles of the other belief systems. So when I hear certain philosophers and when I hear certain theists state that, well, I don't believe, well, it's not that I don't believe, but I don't think miracles any longer validate the belief in God or whatever, I question, because your whole belief system is based on miracles to begin with. And the reason why you believe in it is because of the miracles that have been supposedly happening during those times of your prophet or of your Messiah or of your prophets in the past. So again, I do think that Hume's fourth argument does have validity to it. That the religious claims or religious conflicts based on miracles and therefore claims undermine and destroy one another is a complete and absolute validation, and the reason why we should be skeptical of miracles in and of themselves. Now, fifthly, Hume says the very fact that a miracle story is used to introduce a new religion or to supporting an existing religion is an additional reason for skepticism. This argumentation, I think, carries all the rest of his other argumentations. Because just like how I stated when I was talking about the fourth argument, that most religions are created and build up their validity and build up their constituency through the miracles of their God, to validate the belief system of which they have. And henceforth, if it's just to validate or to start a belief system, to start a religion, then you need to be skeptical, because that means that there are individuals who are out there that want to start something and manipulate you into believing into what they believe in, or even worse, to manipulate you in order to literally hold control over the very way you think. And hence, Hume's fifth argumentation, I think, is his strongest argumentation. And all in all, out of all those arguments that Hume has made, I think that we can now come to an end to this show today. So thank you all for listening. I am going to make a series based on the case against miracles, where we're going to delve more into miracles and delve into either harder ways to not explain miracles, but to create a case against them. But this is just in the beginning. What we have right now, this is predominantly just like an intro to the case of miracles in and of this, or case against miracles in and of itself. And when we continue on with the series, it's not going to continue on next week or anything like that. We're going to delve into something else next week, but at least in the week to come, or weeks to come, we will jump back into miracles and really start to flesh out more and more and more and more and more in order to have better argumentation for the case against miracles. So I really hope that you guys like the show. Please, again, if you like the show, hit that like and subscribe button, because it really does help us. We also do have a Patreon page down in the description below. So if you want to support us on Patreon, please smack that button and support us on Patreon, because it helps us with future projects coming down the line and coming down the road. So again, thank you all very much for coming in and listening, and I hope that you have a fantastic night, and I will see you next weekend. But and before I go, I do apologize. I want to thank so much my Patreon supporters, Linear, Dion LaShay, and Calasia, for really helping us do what we love to do, and helping me do what I love to do, is promote Promethean secularism to you, the viewer. So, forgot what the heck I was going to say. But anyways, thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week on the Promethean Secular Frontier. Now it's time for me to vominos.